Welcome to the podcast of Data and Analytics in Business. We will learn from the leading industry experts using data and analytics to solve the problems and create values in practice. We will also learn where the industry is heading to and how data and analytics will shape the industry in the future. Most importantly, how they are preparing their business for digital transformation and disruption in the future. I'm your host, Jason Tan, and thank you for listening.
Good morning, Anthony. Welcome to the Analytics Show podcast. So excited to have you here in this morning after all the flood event that we just went through a few weeks ago in Brisbane, not in Melbourne.
Thank you, Jason. It's wonderful to be here. We've had a couple of goes at this, and it's been my fault that we haven't landed it quite right yet. So hopefully this time is the time.
That is no problem at all. Things can happen, and I think it's more about flexibility. It's the same thing that I would say we would have to do for the customer with using the data and analytics as well, right? So we'll certainly talk a lot more about that. Now, here's a question that I wanted to ask you. Given that what we have just gone through over the last 2 years with COVID, I know your first job in your career was a biostatistician in the field of epidemiology.
Yeah. My
question for you is, what does a biostatistician do?
Yeah, it's a wonderful and rewarding career. For people who are looking to get into analytics and data science in general, it's a fabulous apprenticeship. By and large, the work takes 2 or 3 different forms. The first is to work with those medical researchers who have got a brilliant idea about is exposure to this thing increasing your risk for a certain disease or a certain adverse health outcome, or is this intervention or this diet that people take on is it predictive of a good health outcome? That's probably about 80% of what we do. And there's also a really big, heavy emphasis on designing those trials, either designing them prospectively, where you grab a number of people and you give them drug A, and you grab a whole bunch of other people, you give them drug B, and then you follow them forwards in time, or the different type of trial, which is a little bit more common, which is you find a whole bunch of people with condition A and a whole bunch of people with condition B, or who don't have condition A, and you look backwards in time and figure out did they have an exposure to something or not. The most important thing that you can do is design that trial correctly, robustly, and so a lot of people will have heard of power and sample size. In the corporate world, sample size doesn't really matter too much, because if you don't think you've got enough data, just go 2 days backwards and grab another 1 million transactions. So volume of data is not a problem. But when you're in medical research, you need to remember that you are looking at people's health records. So you don't want to sample not enough people, because then that's a waste of resources, and the trial never has a chance to test the hypothesis that you've proposed, test it robustly, I should say. And if you sample too many people, then you are, you're looking at a number of people's health records unnecessarily. So, if you just say, well, I don't need to do sample size calculation, I've got all of, Victoria's information for the last 10 years. Well, that's not being respectful to the data that lives within people's health records. So, getting the design of that trial right is of absolute paramount importance. And then you're involved in doing the analysis. And analysis takes a large number of forms. Predominantly, it's what we in the corporate world would think of as a prediction problem. So that's a large slab of the work that we do. But then there are any number of other things that we do as well. One of the things that I really enjoyed doing was capture-recapture experiments, which came from a heritage of understanding whether or not certain species of animals were becoming extinct. You could repurpose that analysis to understand, how large is what's the population of drug users, illegal drug users. And you can't exactly go out and say, hey, Jason, I'm doing a survey. Do you use illegal drugs? Your incentive is to not give me, and if you're a user, you're not incentivized to give me an honest answer. And so trying to find different ways out in the field where we can capture that information.
Yep.
And then the last thing that I worked on, which none of my friends were interested in at the time, was how disease spreads through populations. And over the last couple of years, among friends and family, I've never been more popular. All of a sudden, they were interested in what I actually did. So, but I would say, and when I say it's a fantastic apprenticeship, I spoke before about respecting the data and having the right sample size and sampling correctly so that you can answer the question that you're chasing down. The importance of modelling probabilities, whereas not largely, but a lot of times we model scores because we oversample the ones and undersample the zeros in a corporate environment. So we score customers. We don't necessarily model the probability. Once you measure the probability of something and you understand the value or the utility of the outcome, then you can use that probability and that value and you can do some really interesting work. So then lastly, what I would say to all of that is, sampling correctly, it gives you a great grounding in understanding how to truly answer the question the organisation is looking for. And then, and I said lastly, and then truly lastly, because a lot of you're working in a public health domain, any results that you find, you need to find ways to create an impact. If you find out that this particular exposure to this thing creates an adverse health outcome, you need to find a way to explain that into communities, into health environments. And it's very difficult to do that with a black box type of modelling technique. So you need to be very clever about feature creation, and use what we know now, what we call now is the more traditional techniques, generalized linear models, and in most common form it comes out as logistic regression. So being a real handcrafting artisan of feature variables to get the explainability that you need. It was a fabulous career.
Was it a smooth transition from being a biostatistician to what you have been doing over the last 10 or 20 years in the corporate world?
No, Jason, not at all. And I put it down mostly to my own naivety, because I do see many academics, or I do see many postgrad students who come straight out of a research program into a corporate world and be very successful. But for me, I had gone from 9 years, almost 10 years in academia, where I got to choose what I worked on. People would approach me with problems that they were working on, ask if I was interested in helping. Almost always the answer was yes, by the way, because you're working on really interesting problems. But you get to pick and choose what you work on. Pretty much the only thing that you, particularly an early stage, an early career academic, the thing that you don't get to choose is how much teaching you do and the actual subjects that you teach. But that's okay. That's still quite enjoyable. And then transitioning into the corporate world, where on day one, so my first corporate job was in fraud at National Australia Bank, and turned up on day one, and my new boss said, "Antony, great to meet you. There's your desk. There's your security pass. Now we're having problems with some criminal gang over in this part of Australia. We think doing stuff from this part of the world with counterfeit credit cards. Now, on your way, you need to go solve that problem. And it was like a punch to the face. I just realised, oh, wow, I don't have the privilege and the freedom to choose what I work on anymore. So it took me longer than it should have to adjust. But that was an embarrassment on my behalf. That was my own naivety.
How would you advise the people who who have done a PhD and then coming into the corporate world to not perhaps repeat of the history that you just explained to me?
How would I coach people?
Yeah.
Look, the person I would coach, the person who I think needs coaching was the young Antony Ugoni. That is, that guy really needed some help at the time. I think universities are doing great jobs with what they call capstone projects or internships, etc., where you get that taste. You get that taste of the corporate pressure of what you're working on. So they're doing much better, and I think the students of today are increasingly they're just much more aware of the world around them. Whereas back when I went to university, you were very much on a linear track with a very finite number of peers, and so you didn't have this wider exposure. But I think the students of today have an enormous amount of exposure to many different things. They're just more robust.
Now, coming back to these, share with us about your current role as an advisor at Flow of Work.
Yep. What's that all about?
Tell us a little bit more about your current role as an advisor. What attracted you to join them as an advisor, and maybe a quick shout out for what they do at the Flow of Work?
Yeah. So a really ambitious group of people solving a really hard problem, working with HR environments to help those HR environments create a better and more and varied opportunities for their own staff. So we know that right now staff are very hard to come by. Retention is really, really, really important. And so finding ways to keep staff and develop staff have never been more important than they are today. And so with the Flow of Work group, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out, with all the history of information that we have on staff members, how can we use that information to inform, here's Jason today in this role. How do we develop him? What's the best way to develop him, retain him, keep him engaged?
I think that will be really useful for a lot of the part that we are going to be discussing today. And that brought me up to the next question. I know that you are a board member for Center of Business Analytics at the University of Melbourne, and also the chairperson at the Institute of Analytic Professionals of Australia. Now, would you please tell us a little bit more about the works that you do for these two organizations, and perhaps a quick shout out about these two organizations in case the listener who are from outside of Australia?
Absolutely. So Institute of Analytics Professionals Australia, we're working on a number of things. By and large, if I just capture it in one kind of umbrella theme, we're trying to help organisations understand the role that their analytics professionals can play, bring great awareness. We're trying to have a voice and push along the agendas of ethical use of data, really important. We're trying to get to the C-suite and make them much more aware of capabilities within organisations. And we're also trying to showcase the best of our industry, the great work that people do. And so one example is, we do the top 25 analytics leaders in Australia every year, which is a wonderful event. We, as an industry, are typically very introverted. We don't celebrate ourselves too often, and so we just decided we needed a way to showcase that talent, and so that's been a wonderful exercise. Just seeing the beaming individuals on those calls that we've had to do the last couple of years, but in person, when they get called out, their amazing work has been fantastic to see. And for the Centre for Business Analytics at Melbourne Business School, that is about building analytic capability. So there's a very technical component to obviously to those courses, to the master's degree that we host. There's good professional development within the course, but also significant work in helping those individuals connect to organisations, to the wider organisation where they'll go and work much better than ever before. So that's the master's degree. Whereas a lot of, you'll see a lot of masters of data science or analytics, etc. They are more about wholly and solely 100% technical capability. So at Melbourne Business School, we want to spread that further into, professional development of those soft skills that you need to kind of have greater impact. And pushing forward a research program is about impact of data and analytics within corporations.
Would you say those are the main reasons that attracted you to join this organization in the first place?
I've always been thinking about, so from the earliest age, I knew I wanted to be a mathematician. There's no such thing as data science back in the days when I was in primary school. I knew in primary school I wanted to be a mathematician. And I always saw the world through the lens of maths and data, but nobody, and I always saw the opportunity, but there weren't too many people celebrating that kind of capability. So I think it's not a miracle, but I think, traffic lights, for example, what an unbelievable invention, and how much order do they bring onto the roads? How much safety do they bring? You couldn't count the number of lives that have been saved because, great, queuing theory has been applied at all these intersections. And nobody celebrates the people who invented traffic lights. And it sounds, most people think, well, what is this guy talking about? There are traffic lights everywhere. Of course we've got traffic lights. But at one time we didn't, right? Yeah. And somebody thought of the idea, and they just got better and better through the use of good analytical techniques. So I've always thought that these people don't get celebrated enough. Not that they do these things to be celebrated, but acknowledged or appreciated. Because once you acknowledge and appreciate the work that these people do, it's not about building a statue. It's about saying, okay, I can see the problem that existed before. I can see that you took, these approaches and applied these techniques to solve the problem. I've got this other problem to solve. Do you think you can help with that? And because we're so, like I said, because we're so introverted, I don't think we push ourselves out there enough to be able to be called upon to solve the next problem.
The word that you use, introvert, is resonate with me a lot because I know as a data analytic guy, as an engineer, in my career, I used to be the one who just put my head down and get the things done rather than speaking up and get our voice heard. To some extent, I feel, and like you bring it up, I think that is part of the thing that we have to do a little bit more to say, hey, this is what we can do. This is how we can help. And I think the very fact that we have the media echoing of what we do is a great thing that is happening right now. Although I still think that to some extent, maybe this is, I want to ask from your experience is then, do you think that the analytic professionals are seen as valuable enough by the organization in general? Especially before that, all these things about data scientists or data analytic or data being a sexy thing in the last 10 years?
I think, so I think the answer is yes, in pockets. Yeah. I think that the organisations who are doing this well and getting the most out of their analytics teams, for the most part, they're doing it because there is a very, very senior person somewhere who sees that opportunity and is telling the rest of the organisation, this is the direction that we're going, right? I made some notes here just to make sure I get all of these out. If you think about what we do as an analytics group, I'm going to miss some things, but I've got 3 things here. One thing that we do is we find ways to automate processes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we come in. We've never worked in that organisation before, but we've got the skills to find ways to automate processes. Now, what we're doing there is we are probably taking a job out of a human being's hand who does this thing in a manual fashion, and that human being and the team that they work in and the team leader who they work for, that's why they turn up to work every day. They like doing this job, and then all of a sudden, our community come in and says, hey, you probably won't need to do that anymore. We're going to automate that. And so these humans, if you don't manage that communication well, they're about to be disrupted, and just human nature being what it is, they want to keep doing their job, and
Yep.
So there's this tension that doesn't help move the organisation forward. We find one of the other things we do is we find insights. We trawl through the data, and I remind people that we've very rarely been in the shop selling the thing. We've very rarely managed the shop. We've very, very rarely delivered the thing. We've very rarely built, that widget, whatever it might be. This insight that we're delivering, and we're delivering at scale, and we're delivering it in a timely fashion, that in the past has typically been the role of somebody who's been in that organisation, in that industry for a long time. And people say this person's got an instinct for this industry. They think of really good things. The reality is that instinct is they are they're sucking in a whole bunch of information. They're observing what's going on in the industry, with the customers, with the staff. They've got their own internal model that they're using to churn out insights. Now, we come in and we are disrupting those people. So once again, we've come in and we've disrupted a human being. And then the other thing that we do is we take, again, it's those people who've got that good instinct. We scale IP. So we try to find all the expert humans in the organisation and say, hey, tell me how you chose that customer next to talk to. Tell me, you're driving the truck for the organisation. Tell me why you went left instead of right. And then we take all that in intellectual property and we try to code it. So then all of a sudden, what we've done is we've disrupted those experts as well. And what we've failed to realise for the longest time is that the things that we're doing is taking responsibility and power away from humans, and we haven't acknowledged that. And so the thing that holds us back is communication. purely and simply communication and change. And these are disciplines in their own rights. And we've failed, by and large, to see that those are disciplines. We come from a world of black and white. So our change in communication style is, hey, you used to do this, it took you 10 days. We've changed it over here. It takes us 30 minutes now. Of course, this is a good thing. Everybody kind of get on with it. And that sort of disruption to human beings doesn't go down well. So, the best, functional capabilities, if you think about HR, or if you think about technology, if you think about finance, typically the way they work is within an organization is they have a point person. The retail business has, this point person for finance, and that finance person will manage work, will manage comms, will manage processes for that retail business. There'll be somebody for the business. I'm thinking about banking here. Business bank, there'll be somebody there for wealth. We haven't created those relationships. We haven't done a great job of creating those point people who can talk in the language of the retail bank, in the language of the business bank, in the language of the wealth management arm, to show them, hey, this is what we're doing. We're automating this, but that doesn't mean we're disrupting your people. It means we're giving them opportunity to do these other more interesting, exciting things. So a long-winded answer to your question is, one of the reasons why we kind of fail at this, or kind of get cut through, is because we have failed to understand the power of communication. And in the absence of, if there isn't a very senior person saying, everybody, this is where we're going, we're doing this, I'll listen to your arguments as to why we don't go down this path with analytics, but they better be strong and compelling arguments. Otherwise, we're going there. Without that person, we are then trying to, influence from the bottom up, with no history in the organisation, with the least amount of context around how the organisation works, and we just keep coming up against these blocks because we haven't forged those communication paths.
There is so many things to unpack in that. And one of the things that I want to draw that out is getting the technical people, getting the data and analytic people to talk to the business, to go out and visit the shop and sit there and observe how the customer are interacting, and or perhaps sit in the call center, listen to the call, how the call center consultant talking to the customer in terms of serving their needs. I find that as much as we are in 2022, it seems like it's still a bizarre concept of telling that to some of the data analytic professionals to do that, although I really think is super valuable things, because at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is to solve a customer problem. How do you think the senior position could get the message out about the importance of that?
The importance of the analytics team, or the importance of being with the call center people?
Being with the call center people, being with the frontline people to understand the challenges that they are facing.
I think
and the customer are facing.
Yeah, so I honestly think that is the least, at the very least, what we should be doing as a community and an organisation. The middle manager or the senior leader, the most senior analytics leader, should be championing this message, but the individuals themselves should be individual data scientists, BI specialists, data governance experts, whoever they are. They should be demanding, hey, I want to go spend half a day at the call center. I want to go spend half a day in a branch. I want to go out on deliveries with the delivery driver, once a quarter, once a half, whatever it might be. It gives you an enormous amount of context. The first thing it does is it gives you humility. All of a sudden you realise you're kind of not the centre of the organisation's universe, that there are, people doing stuff, frontline staff, who are doing things that you just don't understand. difficult or complex or how busy they are. The other thing you do is you get context around, you know, when I talk to a customer, I find that these are the things that really resonate well. And you think, oh, I never thought of that as an analyst, but I can code that up. I can look into the data, and like if I could give that to you on a platter, you know, would that be helpful if you could see that on a screen straight away as opposed to trying to tease it out of conversation? And then the other thing is there are things that these frontline people do that you just never would have thought of back in head office around what's the most important customer to speak to next. Or I remember speaking to one person who works for a large logistics company, couldn't understand why the truck drivers never took the route that, you know, the data scientists had suggested through their algorithms. So and then went out on that drive, and you know, all of a sudden they get to see things like roadworks, or you know, one driver had a really good understanding of the, you know, whatever they had in the back of the truck, and so if it was glassware or something fragile, they weren't going to take the fastest path. They were going to you know, avoid the rough roads or the roads with the speed humps, etc. So all that context is really, really important, as opposed to a data scientist saying, hey, I'm looking at a, you know, a two-dimensional map here, and you want to get from point A to point B. The algorithm says, you know, go down these roads. So getting all that nuance and that context is super important. Super important. And then the last thing of all of it is, eventually what you get at the front line is you get this understanding, or you get this connection where instead of saying, oh, the data scientists have asked me to call this customer because of these things, they don't get it. You know, that customer will never respond to this conversation. Now you get, oh, Antony from the analytics team, and he said they've sent me this. I can see why they would have sent it to me. But now, because I've got that connection, I'll give Antony a call and say, hey, here's some context. Here's the reason why this won't work. So you need to create this two-way kind of path of communication within the organisation. It's super important.
Exactly. Apart from those things, and despite that, so many organizations are now creating the role of chief data officer, chief data analytic officer all around the world. Do you think they have got a seat at the decision table? Or if not, what do you think is their biggest challenge when trying to influence the decision in their organization?
Yeah, so there are, we don't have enough time to talk about all the challenges. If I split the answer into two separate paths, one is for new businesses, you know, for startup businesses. For the most part, those organisations understand that bricks and mortar and large-scale kind of human workforces only are not the way of the future. You know, digital and data will play a large role in this startup being successful. And you only have to look at, you know, who is successful by measures of kind of scale and globalization and market cap and all those things. I'm not saying that they are the be-all and end-all of success, but if you just look at those things, Google, Apple, Amazon, eBay, things like Spotify, Netflix, etc., Alibaba, all these organizations, you know, Amazon in particular, went out of its way to reinvest year after year after year into data and infrastructure and be unprofitable in a lot of those years, because they knew that data and the ability to use that data was key. So in that startup world and the emerging new businesses, I think the CDO, CDAO, or whoever it is, the most senior data person, definitely has a voice at the table. If I think about older organizations, you know, 50, 100-year-old organizations, we're at this point in time where the organisations understand. I don't think there'd be one CEO who would say to you, no, I think data's a passing fad. I don't think it's going to be important. I think they all get it. They absolutely get it. And they start projects, but then they run headlong into legacy.
Yes.
And if you have a 50-year-old organisation, the chances are, some of your technology is 40 years old. And I made a joke on another interview I did the other day. So people will start doing these data programs, and there'll be this table over here that it appears that nobody's using, and so they'll delete it, and then all the toilets on level 4 start flushing. It's like, oh, okay, we better put that table back there, right? Because there's all this interconnectedness that all the people who built that connectedness have disappeared. The documentation, at worst, never existed. At best, has been lost through the sands of time. And so these legacy organisations, these older organisations have got this legacy of, we need to go forwards, and we need to build modern capability, but we're anchored to all this Frankenstein thing of the past.
Yep.
And so a lot of those organisations will say, okay, going forwards is going to be costly. So how do we justify that cost? It's going to be a whole bunch of decommissioning and automation and cleaning up of the old world. And that old world, those are not 1-year projects. Those are 3, 5. Some organisations have been doing that for 10 years. And so, trying to get the best of the latest and the new and the capability that's available, when you anchor it to all this historical legacy, it's very hard to move forwards fast when you've got this thing that holds you back. So, some organisations are doing it really well. They acknowledge the past, and that stuff needs to be fixed, but they're moving forwards with the new stuff, and they're not tying them together. So, the loose tie together is, I'm going to build this new stuff. I'm going to reimagine how we use data. But I know that there are these important things over here in the past that we still need to do. So I'm going to develop the new stuff. I'm going to develop the new stuff with the opportunity to decommission the old stuff.
I agree. I think what you described was perfectly fitting in terms of what is happening. These older organizations have the enterprise system that they bought from all these software vendor. My question then for you is, what do you think they can do to solve this problem where they can be a little bit more digital native? They can utilize the data and the power of the data, like the big five, like Amazon, like Google, all those people. What do you think the chances they can do that?
Look, I think it's within large organisations with a large amount of data in particular, but even smaller organisations. I think it is absolutely 100% within their grasp to get enormous value out of their data. I think a number of things need to happen. I think one is the organisation's strategy, not data strategy, not analytics strategy. I think as soon as everybody understands the organisation's strategy and gets behind that strategy, then magical things happen. And that sounds so simplistic. However, where I see a lot of analytics teams and professionals kind of struggle is where they don't, they're doing their best to deliver for the organisation, but there's nothing that ties everybody together. And so a lot of people are doing really impressive pieces of work that deliver value for the organisation by accident. So that's an organisational and cultural thing, and it's not just analytics that struggles to deliver because of a lack of clarity. It's all functions in the organisation. So that's one. The second thing is, because, you know, before I said, you know, automating processes, finding insights, scaling IP, you know, just three of the things that we do, and that disrupts human after human after human. I think that organisations can do a much better job, and this is on average, right? Some do it well, some not so well. But understand, you know, acknowledge that data will have a role in the future of the organisation. And so instead of wheeling in these data scientists and scaring everybody, you wheel in the data scientist, you build stuff, but the rest of the organisation, you have a responsibility to take them on the journey. And part of taking them on the journey is educating them on their skills. And so, you know, for that for me is, if you identify everybody within the organisation and kind of the role, the kind of role that they do in the organisation, we need to understand what they need to know about data. So the frontline person who's entering data into the frontline systems, they need to understand the importance of good, clean data. Yeah? They need to understand that, you know, when the system doesn't do exactly what you want it to do, and so you trick it somehow, some way, and you know, there are many examples of that. And so you trick it so that the customer gets this better, faster outcome, or, you know, makes your day job easier. You're messing up all that data in the background. So understand that downstream impact that you have, and also understand that by putting in good data, if we're feeding information back to you to help you service the customer better, you know, good, clean data, it makes your day job much better. Then you have everything in between, you know, from that frontline person, you'll have a whole bunch of people kind of within head office, say. So you're training up data scientists, BI specialists, data governance, engineers, etc. You need to maintain their development. But then there are a whole bunch of people within the organisation who are consumers of that information. So how do you train them to engage better with the analytics community? Ask, you know, better, more searching questions of that data. Understand what the analytics community is capable of delivering, so that when you ask a question, you're helping that analyst extract the maximum amount of value out of that interaction. And then at the very, very senior level and the strategic level, I don't think we've done enough of a good job helping them understand the art of the possible. And so, you know, the answer to your question is education. It's not one size fits all. People are feeling, you know, the non-analytics community, you know, quite rightly, feeling a little bit apprehensive about what they perceive is coming out of data and the analytics community. So, you know, we have to find ways to bring them on that journey.
Bringing together what we have just discussed, could it be, can it be also because that the analytic professional may not be able to find a seat at the decision-making table, is partly because analytic is still seen as a subset of the enterprise team, a subset of the finance team, a subset of the marketing, rather than individual contributing functional team, despite there are more CDO team these days.
Yep, absolutely. So it's interesting. It's interesting to go into an organisation, and, you know, we spoke before about those functional units. There is a finance team, and all the finance individuals know, you know, broadly speaking, in a finance career, they know what the pathway is in their organisation. It's go from intern to mid-level, from mid-level to team leader, from team leader to senior leader, whatever it might, all the way to CFO. In HR, you know, there's a obvious career path to the managing director of people, for example.
Yeah.
technology, the same, to the CTO or the CIO. But analytics teams, for a number of different reasons, they kind of emerge organically within, like you said, within marketing, within finance, within logistics, within manufacturing, and there's no connection between them. There's no community, and so again, the best organisations see that as a gap. The best organisations see the analytics community as fundamental to the growth and the sustainability of the organisation, and so they are building, similar community of data professionals. Now, that's not to say that the marketing team won't have their marketing analytics people, and the fraud team won't have their fraud analytics people. But where we need to get to is we need to get to a world where all those analytics professionals feel connected. The same way that even though I've got a finance partner, working with me, helping me look after my accounts, I've got a HR partner, etc. They still go home to the finance teams, to the HR teams. That's where they report into. That's where they get their professional development from. That's where they get promotion through. That's where they learn best practice. Parts of the business who hold on to their analytics professionals tightly, I think are holding those individuals back, because, the marketing professional kind of butts up against the head of marketing, and the analytics professional doesn't necessarily want to be head of marketing. Two, by not having them together as a community, what you really want is the analytics professionals in the fraud team, once they get tired of fraud, you don't want them leaving the organisation. You want them to be part of that community to say, I'm a bit tired of fraud, but, I saw Joe or Mary over there working on this stuff in pricing. That looks really interesting. Is there an opportunity? Oh, yeah, there's an opportunity. Let's do a crossover between individuals. Let's help you develop your career working across many different problems within this organisation. And then we've got many very different ways to help build your capability, to help build your career. And you don't get that by having these teams stuck in different silos. So again, the best organisations are understanding this and doing better at connecting those analytics professionals.
Absolutely. How do you think we can then persuade or get the C-level to change their perception, where, especially in the older organization, of viewing analytic professional only playing a supportive role? They can actually also play a key role in running the business as well.
Yeah, and so there's a short answer to that, and that is education. Yeah. So executive education about the role that analytics plays. The way to structure, the way to kind of champion that cause. One other thing that analytics runs up against, again, I talked about automating processes, finding insights, scaling IP. The CEO or the CXO and the board, their minds are so full. There is so much stuff that is compliance-based and legislated that they have to do, that they very rarely have the luxury of time to think about what are the things that we should do. How do we reimagine our business of the future? How do we drive new lines of business? They're so not overwhelmed, but their days are so overtaken with all this other stuff that's forced upon them from the outside. They don't have the opportunity to think about the art of the possible. And so finding ways to fast track their knowledge of the art of the possible, I think, is going to be really important. And that's a professional development thing. There are any number of exec level focused education institutions. This is one of the reasons why I'm working with Melbourne Business School, is to help inform them around exec education. How do we get analytics onto the agenda?
Is that some sort of like the short course that uses from the University of Melbourne to allow these C-level to get this sort of education about data and analytics, what they can do so that they can reimagine the business that to be run?
Absolutely. So and you know, at Melbourne Business School we've already got I think we call it data for decision makers.
Yeah.
So we've developed that sort of capability just to give people the opportunity to get outside the organisation, lift their heads up and say, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Oh, I didn't know you had to consider this thing. So giving education and communication, I think, solve most problems. Leaving it to a technical community to push up into the organisation from the bottom up, I think it's really, really incredibly hard to do. Incredibly hard to do. And it takes a long time. And, you know, people at, I don't know what the average lifespan, I don't know what the average tenure is in this C-level role, but it's not 10 years. It's more like 3-4 years time. And so if you're trying to push from the bottom up,
yeah,
by the time you've pushed and created influence and got some momentum, you know, those senior sponsors have moved on, and then you've got another group of people come in, and then you need to start again. Yeah,
I so agree. I think that is certainly one of the biggest challenges I have seen.
Sorry, Jason. You know, I don't want people to think, you know, here's Antony complaining about nobody's listening to him. He just needs to be a better communicator. I definitely take that feedback on board, and you know, my communication style, etc. That's always something that I'm working on. But I just keep going back to the organisations who are absolutely winning at enormous scale, and time again, the thing that strings them all together continuously is that senior executive level, knowing the role of data, championing the role of data, and being knowledgeable enough to push the organisation, both data and non-data professionals, to kind of move forwards on this capability.
No, I think from my experience, I certainly know the challenges of being the technical, trying to push up. That is something that I have personal experience, and that is something that I have seen so many people struggling with. And I think part of the reason why I am running this podcast is that I want to show people that, hey, as a technical people, we can walk the talk, we can talk the talk as well. We can we can upskill ourselves to communicate, and the importance of doing that sort of communication in order to spread the word of what are the things that we can do and how they can be done properly. So it is something that I feel like a lot of people can resonate with that, and it's certainly one thing that I resonate really well. That brings me to the next question is, what do you think as a community of the data and analytics that we could do to help this community to have a seat at the decision-making tables?
Yeah, so I think so as a community, not necessarily as a function within an organisation, but there is definitely roles. But let me talk about as a community. I think as a community, we need to continuously find ways to showcase the great stories. Yeah, that's one thing. I think within organisations, one thing that we've sometimes failed to do, and we fail to do more often than I think is comfortable, we are so, you know, we want to be part of the organisation. We don't want to be thought of as a separate part. We want to be, you know, one of the team members. And so when we get asked to do a particular piece of work, we will go and do this piece of work. And again, I'm talking in generalisations again. Oftentimes we forget that all the legwork to solve that problem that's been asked is most of the work that you need to do to go and then explore the hidden insight that exists in that data. And so somebody would say, I just need a report that looks like this, these rows, these columns, a couple of these filters. We'll deliver that report. You've gone 80% of the way of, building a predictive model, for example. And so if you just go that extra mile and say, hey, here's the thing that you asked for, but I just want to let you know, while I was doing that, I just took a little bit of extra time. Here's a whole bunch of insight that I found. You never asked me for this, but this is stuff that exists in the data that you may have never known. Opportunity. This stuff over here, it's just random noise. This stuff over here is true signal. And so finding ways to surprise and delight, I think, is really important. And with the organisations who are a little bit more mature and have asked for things that that automate or deliver things into field somehow, don't stop at delivering what was asked for. Say, hey, you asked me to automate this thing. I've automated it. Now I've been monitoring it, and for some reason, I don't know, when it gets above 25 degrees in the factory, I've noticed in the data it says it gets too warm, this thing slows down, error rate goes up, etc. Whatever it might be, right? It's a lead generation capability. It's I've noticed in South Australia, in this region, this sort of lead works really well, but in Victoria, the same lead it doesn't work at all. I don't know why. I suggest we do a bit of focus work type investigation, but delivering on the thing and then walking away from it, that's minimal, or that's the minimum that you should be doing.
Yeah.
Delivering on that thing and then loving it enough and thinking that's important enough for the organisation to keep improving upon it. I think by doing those things, going that extra mile, I think that's the stuff that makes you a valued contributor, a valued team member, to say, hey, Jason, that was great work that you did on that thing over there. We've got another problem that we're trying to solve, as opposed to, thanks, Jason, you delivered exactly what I asked for, no more, no less. That's not going to drive awareness or connectedness within the organisation.
And exactly on that, I think it still also comes back to a lot of the things that we discussed earlier, which is about data analytics, data science is beyond than just the data and beyond than just the technology. At the end of the day, is really what sort of business problem are you actually really solving? What sort of business value are you really achieving? Because without solving those problems, without providing those value, then what is the point of doing data and what's the point of doing analytics?
Absolutely. Like the best leaders, the best analytics professionals that I've seen, there's one thing that they do commonly. When the problem's getting really hard, it's either the algorithm's not converging, or the data's wrong, or something over here isn't working. They'll sit back and they'll say, hey, everybody, let's just pause for a moment. Let's just remind ourselves, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? Because sometimes you go down this technical path, and you get really excited about the technical problem.
Yes.
You get, okay, that's not actually solving what the organisation needed solved. Yeah. So just pausing and just reminding yourself, hold on, what are we doing here? What's the thing that we're solving here? Let's just kind of remind ourselves on the thing that we're working on.
And one of the other things that I have personally noticed, and I am increasing spending more time while solving some of the business problem, is I am spending more time to understand the user behavior and the psychology. Like, for example, I could do all the things that I thought that they would be doing, but for some reason, some of those users, they just never wanting to click the button or do sort of things that we suggest them to do from the algorithm, right? And what I have found, psychology is so important to be understood. Do you found that is been the experience that you have in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of people who will be disrupted by what you're doing. There's a whole bunch of people who they measure themselves against, I've been in the organisation for 20 years, and all of a sudden these very junior people have come in with access to data, and they're telling me things I don't know. That's a bit confronting. So as technical and mathematical as our science is, we have to remember, everything that we do is it's a contact sport, right? We're dealing with humans day in, day out. So
Exactly.
Psychology is unbelievably important. One of the things that I do on the side in terms of my own development, I'm really interested in economics. I would never ever put myself up as an expert in economics, but everything that I read and everything that I listen to typically comes back to the same theme over and over and over again, and that is humans respond to incentives. And so, as soon as you understand that, figuring out as we interact with other parts of the business, what is the incentive for them to work with us? Further to that, if we are bringing disruption, and I hate the word disruption, but if we're bringing disruption into the organisation, what are people motivated by, such that they'll accept the disruption or they need to protect their patch? This is all psychology.
Exactly. Now, to conclude this interview, my final question for you is, given what you have achieved in your career, what would be your single piece of advice for any data analytic professional that they should perhaps have to achieve a career in the data analytic world, or perhaps even in the business world, if should they want to move to other positions?
So I would say, there are a ton of things that I've failed at and I wish I'd known earlier in my careers. But particularly for the for the people new into the industry, I always remind people that you have this privileged position. You have access to the data. You can do stuff with the data. There's no excuse for you not knowing what the organisation is trying to achieve. You just need to go and find, the right person who can, explain what the organisation's strategy is to you. And by the way, make sure you ask several people and get a consistent story. So data, ability to analyse the data and the strategy, and then very, very often, sometimes not, but very, very often, you are also a customer of that industry or that organisation. So if you work in a B2C organisation, chances are you are a customer. So if you've got access to the data and can do stuff with it, and you know what the organisation's strategy is, put yourself in the customer's mindset to say, now, if the organisation wants to do this thing, wants to sell these things, wants to go down this path with me as a customer, what are the things that would resonate with me as a customer? What are the things that I do with their product? How do I transact? How do I use their product? What are the things I do in my life such that I would love this organisation to give me a call and say, hey, Anthony, just want to let you know, blah, 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 blah. So as soon as you think like a customer as well, and you do that kind of Venn diagram thing of all the insight that you could bring to bear, that's when you can create real magic. That's when you can create stuff that says to the organisation, hey, myself and my peers as a customer, I'd really like you to talk to me about this thing when I do this. And by the way, went into the data, there are 500,000 customers doing this exact same thing. That is, I think, the missing piece, because we often approach this problem solving from the perspective of an internal view, an organisation's view of the problem and of the data. So if it's one thing, that's the thing.
So agree. I remember I went through all the web pages to experience exactly what my customer would experience, just to replicate that idea. Now, these are the final two quick fire questions. The first one is, what is your most important first principle?
My most important first principle, is that bit that I spoke about before, what I see some of the best leaders do. Just constantly take pause and think about, what is it that I'm trying to solve here? Again, because we got into this industry because we love the maths, we love the technology, and then we tried to find an organisation that would pay us a wage so that we could do it day in, day out. So my career has been biostats and epidemiology, fraud, customer analytics and marketing, HR and recruitment at Seek, insurance and health services at Bupa. I never grew up, wanting to run a fraud team. I wanted to be a mathematician. I never grew up wanting to, work on job board problems. I wanted to be a mathematician. Now, those have all been fantastically rewarding careers, and I've loved every moment of them. But sometimes, I find myself getting caught up in the, oh, wow, this algorithm works. Look how this thing works, and then reminding myself, hold on. What does the organisation need me to solve? Let's go back to that principle. So that's my first principle.
What is one book that you have read and thought it would have been better for your younger self to have?
To read, yeah. So I'll grab. I knew the question was coming. If I could get, I've got a few. You can never understand how to experiment well enough. That's one of the experiment books that I've got here. There's, like I said before, design of kind of clinical trials, epidemiology, epidemiological designs. That is a fantastic book right there. You and I have had this conversation before, Jason. It's extraordinary to me the number of times that this particular field of mathematics keeps cropping up, and it's unexpected. So everybody needs to have a really good book on trigonometry.
Yep.
So this is this is an old book now, but trigonometry by and large hasn't changed over the last 100 years, but having a good grounding. And then the last book we spoke about, I read this book every couple of years. It's that one there. Fooled by
this one is good.
Is the author's name there? Author's name is there.
Yep.
And this is a book, if you didn't have any humility before, this book will give it to you. Successful people are successful because they absolutely do have work ethic. I believe that if you have enough work ethic, then you can develop intelligence, you can develop leadership, all those sorts of things. But this book acknowledges the role that luck plays in your life. So I was lucky enough to be born to parents who valued education, who came to a developed country with a great health system, a great education system. I often wonder in the third world countries, just by scale of number, I know that the solution to many of the world's biggest problems live in the heads of people who live in communities and environments that they just cannot get out of. And so, yeah, the role that luck plays in your life, in your quality of life, in my career, etc., that's a bit of a humbling book to go back to every so often to just remind you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Anthony, for coming on and share how analytic professional can find a seat at the decision-making table. Once again, thank you so much.
No worries, Jason. Thank you for having me on.